Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right past the headlines of Visa's latest earnings report. We're going to focus on the really juicy part, the high-stakes Q&A session. This is where Wall Street analysts really put the company's vision for the future of money to the test.
Okay, so every earnings call has a Q&A session, right? But this one felt different. It was less of a routine check-in and more of a real high-stakes showdown. You had Visa's big, bold vision for an AI-powered future clashing right up against Wall Street's very immediate here-and-now concerns.
So what we're going to do is break down the key battles of ideas that played out. We'll look at everything from the health of today's consumer all the way to the wild AI-powered commerce of tomorrow.
All right, we've broken this down into 5 key themes to make it easy to follow. First up, let's tackle the biggest, most immediate concern on everyone's mind, the economy. So, right out of the gate, the first question was a biggie. Is the consumer finally starting to crack? Some of Visa's competitors had been talking about economic choppiness, so analysts, naturally, wanted to know if those same cracks were starting to show up in Visa's massive network.
But Visa's CFO, he really pushed back on that idea. He pointed straight to the data. His argument was, look, our business is incredibly diversified. It covers everything: debit, credit, everyday groceries, luxury travel, you name it. And because of that, they have this uniquely stable picture of what's going on. The bottom line from him, spending patterns have actually been super consistent all year, especially with high-end consumers who are still spending very, very strongly.
Okay, so let's shift gears to the topic that really, and I mean really, dominated the whole conversation: agentic commerce. So what is this thing, and why was everyone so obsessed with it?
Well, think of it like this. It's basically a super smart AI assistant for your whole digital life. But it's not just about searching for stuff online. No, this is an agent that can actually negotiate and make purchases for you, often without you having to click buy or approve every single little step.
Visa's CEO, Ryan McInerney, he put a really interesting frame on this. He called it the third great wave of digital commerce. And he made a point to remind the analysts, hey, we led the charge on the first 2 waves, desktop e-commerce and then mobile, and you better believe we plan to do the exact same thing here. Okay, so that's the big vision. But how exactly does Visa plan to build the railways, so to speak, for this new kind of AI-driven commerce? The analysts really pushed them on this, asking for the nitty-gritty, the concrete steps they're taking right now. And their strategy has a few different parts. First, they're creating new standards. This means we'll be able to do things like set spending limits for our personal AI agents. Then, they've launched something called the Visa Trusted Agent Protocol. And the key word there is open. This isn't some closed-off Visa thing. It's an open framework that anyone can use. It makes it super easy for a merchant to check that a purchase is coming from your trusted AI and not some random malicious bot.
And this is where it all ties together, because this really gets to the foundation of their whole approach. McInerney said it again and again. Their existing token technology is the absolute key. The tech that replaces your real card number with a unique digital token? He says that is what's going to make all this secure, agent-driven payment stuff possible at a massive scale. And with 16 billion tokens already out there in the wild, a huge piece of that infrastructure is already built.
All right, let's pivot to another future-focused topic that popped up: stablecoins. Now, these are basically digital currencies that are designed to have a, stable value, usually pegged to something like the US dollar. So the big question on the analysts' minds was pretty simple. Are these things a risk to the whole system, or are they something else?
It's easy to see why some people might view stablecoins as a threat, something that could just bypass traditional networks like Visa altogether. But Visa's leadership, they've been framing this as a huge opportunity for a while now. Their argument is that the real sweet spot for stablecoins is in all the places where Visa isn't as strong, like in emerging markets or for complicated cross-border payments. And listen, they are not just dipping their toes in the water here. They are building a seriously deep product pipeline around stablecoins. We're talking stablecoin-linked cards, using them to actually settle transactions on their own network, and even piloting them with Visa Direct to make international payments way faster. The message they're sending is crystal clear. They are all in on this.
Okay, so with all this talk about AI in the future, the analysts kind of pulled the conversation back down to earth. They wanted to dig into how the core business is doing right now, especially in key regions around the globe.
And here's a quick snapshot of that.
For example, they were asked why data processing revenue growth was so high. The answer? A mix of pricing and more business coming from higher-value international areas. And what about the slowdown in Latin America? Well, that was mostly just about inflation cooling down in Argentina, not some fundamental weakness in the business. So the takeaway is, the core engine is still running strong.
All right, let's get to our final theme, and this one really ties it all together. The very last analyst asked a really sharp question. They asked why Visa is planning to grow its expenses right alongside its revenue, which is basically a polite way of asking, why are you reinvesting so much money back into the business instead of just letting it become profit?
And this number right here pretty much explains it all. Those investments, they're fueling some absolutely explosive growth in new areas, particularly their value-added services. We're talking about things like risk management, advisory services, all that good stuff. That part of the business grew a whopping 25% this past quarter. So these new services are quickly becoming a much bigger and much faster growing piece of the whole pie.
You know, the CEO's final comments weren't just your standard, everything's great corporate talk. It was a direct answer to that spending question. He basically said he sees this incredibly rare, transformative moment happening in commerce, all driven by AI and stablecoins. And his argument is that now is the absolute perfect time to invest aggressively to go out and capture that future.
And so that leaves us with the big, crucial question hanging in the air. Visa is making some really bold and frankly expensive bets. They're betting that they can build the core plumbing for the next generation of commerce, just like they did for the last two. So the question isn't if this future is coming, it's whether Visa's big bets will pay off and keep them right at the center of it all.